Okay, hey AP Humans, part 2 of Unit 5. Start with 5.7, Spatial Organization of Agriculture. Basically, what we're going to look at in this one is how large-scale farming, big commercial farms are starting to replace that smaller family farm. We have long, complex commodity chains. Remember from the video Food Machine, the whole Domino's pizza, right? They get their tomato all the way from California, but it goes all the way across the country to a distribution plant in Connecticut, and then it ends up at your apartment in New York City. How lovely. And then obviously because of technology, we have increased economies of scale. That's one of your vocab words. And just again, how diverse our food supply can be around the world. Lots of words. I would say this section of slides has a lot of words, so plan to pause quite a bit to take down what you need. All right. Again, commercial farms have replaced family farms. Corporate farming has made a major shift in agricultural practices. Farmers are practicing more monocropping. Remember, they specialize in one single crop. And because of technology, the carrying capacity of the land has actually been increased because we can water land that typically didn't get watered before. And the use of like pesticides and fertilizers have helped that. As a result, agribusinesses have changed the agricultural labor force. The type of labor and who comes to work in our farms is changing. Okay. Basically, the number of farms has decreased while the number of farms in the world has increased overall, and mechanization has made it easier to farm large plots of land. So again, think about the Food Machine, again, that video we watched where they talk about like these like massive combines that can go and do hundreds and hundreds of acres in the time it would take one person to do like manually. Okay. These commodity chains, again, basically this is just how things are all linked together. So you have a big, huge food corporation at the top, and then underneath it, they've got their own crop production and probably their own farms, or they've contracted out. They also have a research and development where they're looking at the science behind how to grow things. And then, of course, there's the marketing side. How do you get people to want to buy your product? Once those things have made it from the farm, then they end up in the processing factory, then they make it into the production side of it where they actually like put it into like the packaging and stuff like that, and then finally end up in the store for you to purchase. Okay, again, because of technology, we have advanced what a field can produce. We can farm on land that used to not be able to be farmed, and transportation advances. We can actually take product from farther away and bring it closer. So again, the Domino's pizza thing, when you have tomatoes being grown in California, but that they can be shipped safely through, refrigerated machinery all the way across the United States to get to that Domino's pizza in New York City. Okay. Mechanization and low labor costs have changed the nature of farm labor. Basically, what's starting to happen is as the machines are replacing humans, less women are being able to work, which is obviously a concern because the less women who are making an income, that's not good. Family farms have to compete against corporate farms. Now, I will say in the United States, there's kind of a renaissance right now. People are really into like organic food, into farmers markets. So those family farms on a local scale are actually seeing like a boom in business, but it is going to be hard to keep up with your massive, like your ConAgras and your JBLs and your like mega corporations. Processing plants recruit low-cost laborers. So we see a lot of these actually along the Mexican-American border. They're called maquiladoras. And they will actually bring these like day laborers over to a factory just on the United States side of the border and be able to pay them very little for the work that they do. All right. The essential role of U.S. immigrants in the U.S. food supply chain. Again, if it weren't for migrant workers, day laborers, seasonal labor, whatever you want to call it, we would not have the like agriculture business that we have today. So you guys will definitely want to click here and check out more, and then look at this. This is a good infographic about what's going on. All right. Practice questions. Again, pause and go through this on your own to see if you could tease out the answers here. Okay. No surprise. Agriculture is very different than it was 100 years ago. Again, family farms have become large corporate farms. They've been bought out. Agribusiness uses economy of scale and commodity chains to increase revenue. Economy of scale, remember, it's one of your vocab words. It's basically like how much profit are you making at like a local level versus like a larger regional level, maybe to a national level, to a global level. And then commodity chain is like, where does the tomato come from to get to the Domino's pizza truck? Agribusiness practices have increased carrying capacities of the land, and it's your job as a geographer to study the effects of the modern agricultural practice on people and their environment. All right, topic 5.8. This is a biggie. Whenever there's a model in AP Human Geography, not like a model like this, like a model like what you see on the screen, you got to make note that's important. So this is the von Thunen model. And so von Thunen was a dude. He was German, and he basically observed kind of like how like a little village was being like settled, and then what was happening with the agriculture around it. So you guys need to understand this is on a concentric ring plane. It's isotropic. This is assuming that the land is perfectly flat. Obviously, we know that's not like real, so you have to keep that in mind. This von Thunen model also can be applied to like transportation and technology. We'll see this in our Unit 7 on urbanization. And this is also directly tied to another economic model called Weber's least cost theory of industrial location. Basically, it means the closer you are to the source of your material, obviously, the cheaper it is to like produce it, because transportation is very expensive. Okay, so here's the von Thunen model again. So what you guys can see is going on. You have the market or the town in the middle, and then the first ring around it, you will have like seasonal, like things that need to be picked fairly quickly or else they go bad. So like a lettuce or a carrot, for example, like it kind of has a short lifespan, if you will. And then notice you also have like dairy cows. So think about this. Dairy, even with all the modern advancements we have today, dairy is an expensive industry because you have to keep it very cold, and it has a short shelf life. So the closer your dairy is to your market, that's going to cut down on the cost of transporting it and storing it. You want to basically milk the cow and get it straight to the consumer quickly. Okay, the next ring we see out here is your forestry ring. This is where we would get the lumber to maybe build or use or to clear that land. Again, you don't want this to be so far away because lumber is, again, very heavy. So the further you have to transport it, a very heavy material, the more expensive it is. So here, it's just easier to get it to your market. And then out here, you guys can see that there's kind of like your bigger, they call them field crops, corn, your wheat, stuff that you need to have a lot of land for. So it's usually pretty far away from a town. And then once you transport it, once you like go harvest it, it actually cuts down the size of it quite a bit. You're not harvesting an entire stalk of corn. You just get that little cob. And so the cost to transport it isn't so great. And then last ring out here, you guys can see this is your grazing ring. This is where animals, like not dairy cattle, because we want the dairy cows close to milk them, but this could be like your beef cattle or sheep, goats, lambs, like whatever you're grazing out in the fields. Because again, once you take this and you process it down, you're not transporting a whole entire animal anymore. You're only transporting its meat or whatever. All right. So again, think about the market. And what happens here. So this goes into this idea of the bid rent model. That is one of your vocab terms also. So bid rent basically says the closer to the market you are, the higher the land cost is. And we see that. We know that like the closer I want to live to downtown, the more expensive it is. And so the same thing applies here. So you guys can see what happens down here is closer to the market, your land cost is the most expensive. And then the further away you get from your market, the land cost goes down. Then the type of farming, it also it changes. Intensive, remember, requires a lot of just like human hands on something, or it's just it's like a lot of like deep work to get it done. And then the further away it becomes extensive farming, where it's still hard work, but it's just a different type of labor needed to do like shearing a sheep versus milking a cow. Okay, so again, the market is where the goods are brought to sell. The middle ring is going to be your perishable items. Like I said, the ones that have to be close to the market because they have a short shelf life. And so that's going to be, again, like your delicate vegetables, your lettuces, tomatoes, carrots, and then your dairy cows. Okay. Your second ring from the middle is going to be your lumber ring. That's your forestry ring. And again, you don't want it too far away because it's just more expensive to transport. Okay. Then you get your grains. Again, they're not very heavy once they're processed, and they're not perishable. They can be stored for a long time. And you also need like huge cropland to grow these. And then your final one is going to be your extensive space where like the herders are going to have like their cattle or their sheep or whatever. Okay. Nice little practice question for you here. Oops, another one for you here. And again, you'll want to pause these and look through these. Okay, what's your takeaway for Von Thunen? Again, very, very important here. The original interpretation of model, you have the city in the middle, dairy ring, forest ring, mixed crop farming ring, and then finally your livestock ring. That is a direct correlation to the expense of the land and how quick can you get that stuff to market without it going bad. Okay, here's the assumptions versus today. So assumptions was when Von Thunen made this model back in the day, he assumed that all land was all equal, that it was flat, there was only one market center, and that the transportation cost was solely based on how far it was to get something. Here's how it's changed today. Physical landscape varies. So we know there could be a mountain, it could be a river, there could be a lake that you obviously have to navigate around. Climate varies. So the further out from the center of a ring, we saw this with the snowstorm we just had yesterday, or the day before. Fountain, we're in the banana belt, but we're only 7 miles from Colorado Springs. The Colorado Springs, basically downtown north, they got buried. I have friends that live in the very north end of like Black Forest and out in Falcon, and they haven't left their house because the snow covered their door. Multiple markets exist today. So again, like perfect example, downtown Colorado Springs is a separate market. All that stuff on Powers Boulevard, up by like the Target and the movie theater. Fountain is its own market. So we have like they call it multiple nuclei all over the place. Changes in transportation. Obviously, transportation is improved because we use rail, we use semi-trucks, you name it. But the cost of transportation it's not only dependent on the distance, it also depends on is it need to be refrigerated or frozen versus just dry in a truck. Obviously, a refrigerated truck is going to cost a lot more to operate than a non-refrigerated. Okay, technological advancements. I mean, that's kind of an ongoing theme of this course. The role of forests has changed. This is a really interesting one. So we're not necessarily going out and cutting down our own forests for lumber anymore. We're sourcing that lumber from further away. Because there is an effort to protect a lot of the forest land around cities now, so we don't just become megalopolis cities with no natural areas. So the forest right around Colorado Springs, if you by Fort Carson, Cheyenne Mountain, that's protected land. We can't go and cut down those trees, so we have to go further away to source our lumber. I will tell you, during COVID, what's been really interesting is the cost of things has gone up in lumber. A 2x4 piece of wood that you would use to frame your basement, typically market values around $2.50 a piece. We looked at finishing our basement actually during quarantine, and those lumber pieces have gone up to $6 a piece. So obviously that's a whole thing. And then finally, the purpose of agricultural products has expanded. So again, we're not just using a crop in its native form for something. We're using it for multiple purposes. A soybean is a really good example of, we use soy in paper, in ink, clothing articles can have soy part of it. It's not just for being used for food. And so that product is often getting shipped out to other places to be produced as well. All right. So again, this is Von Thunen model. You guys need to be aware of this. You'll hear more about this. Okay. Again, not all land is physically or equally distributed. So access to water is going to be a big impact on Von Thunen. Climate variety, again, depends on where you are, is going to impact this. Okay. Multiple markets. Talked about this. Transportation changes. Obviously, we've moved past horse and buggy for a lot of things. Trains and trucks are obviously important. Big word for you to know here, containerization. That's basically putting stuff, you've seen this if you live in Fountain and you've gotten stuck by a train. What's in those big containers? Oftentimes it's produce or lumber or some sort of agricultural material that is being sent to production. Okay, shipping towns. Again, you'll want to pause these and take a little bit more time to look through these. Okay, why is the market global? Because of advancements in tech, which has allowed us to keep these perishable goods over time. We can get vegetables from the tropics to our little Safeway in Fountain because of refrigeration and technology. All right, practice question again. You'll want to definitely check this out, pause this, and read through it. All right. What's the takeaway today? Regions of specialty farming don't always conform to von Thunen's concentric rings. Again, it's a model. It's always there's never going to be a perfect example of it. But just understand, like, typically that's the pattern you would see. Obviously, variations in land and climate, advances in tech and transportation, and the increased number of markets is going to make that model look a little skewed today. Okay, whew. All right, topic 5.9, the global system of agriculture. Food and agriculture are a part of a global supply chain. Many countries are dependent on other countries. We're going to see this in our final unit when we talk about core and periphery countries. When there's a political stress between countries, that can really upset the flow of agriculture availability. Since the 1950s, the United States has had an embargo on Cuba. So an embargo is we have restricted trade. We won't trade with them. We don't allow them to have basically any of our goods there, and we won't buy any of their goods. And that has had a huge impact on like food availability in Cuba. Like there's just some stuff they can't get because it is a uniquely maybe American thing that they just can't, we won't import to them because we're not on good terms with them. We're getting better, but it's still dicey. Okay, food is a major part of the global trade network. Agricultural products are part of this global supply chain. Countries are dependent on high export commodities. So there are countries that, like United States would certainly be a core country, and then there's periphery countries that really rely on goods to be exported from us. And global food distribution networks, again, are afflicted by political relationships, infrastructure, and world trade patterns. If countries aren't getting along, they're not going to trade. Okay. Again, you're going to want to read through this. Basically, like the United States, Brazil, China, and Argentina are the top exporters of food to smaller dependent nations. There is a crop called luxury or cash crops. Those are the ones that are like your tropical, when we think of like an exotic fruit or a vegetable. Coffee, sugar, and tea are also very big exports from low latitude countries. Those are those mid-tropic countries that, we pay buku bucks to get that. Southern hemisphere countries provide food products to the northern hemisphere during the winter months. So obviously when it's like dead winter here in the United States and we can't have crops growing in the Midwest, a lot of that like wheat and the soybeans and stuff will come from South America, and then it flips during the seasons. Whoops. All right. Farmers in developing countries grow these luxury crops at the expense of local food crops. So what that means is they could be growing like their own vegetables, lettuce, kind of basic vegetables, but instead they're using that land to grow the coffee beans or the bananas because they can get more money for those, again, cash crops. We Americans, we pay pretty good money for coffee. Bananas are still relatively cheap, but I've heard bananas are going extinct. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. That pans out. But obviously, if I'm a local farmer, I might forego growing my subsistence farm, my food for my family, because I know I can make some cash money off of like some of these luxury crops. Okay, but then obviously, where am I getting my own food? We'll figure that out. Farmers in developing countries often use poor farming practices that lead to water pollution, soil erosion, deforestation, and salinization of the soil. Salinization is it becomes salty and saline. Monocropping often leads to environmental and sustainability problems. So as good of an idea as it seems as I'm an expert in corn farming and all I'm going to grow is billions of acres of corn, that is not good for the land. There's a reason, like every crop has its own like pH and its own saline and its own chemical properties that when you grow the same thing over and over and over and over again on the same soil, it can become depleted of that. Whereas if you brought in a different crop, sometimes it gives nutrients back that had maybe previously been depleted. Okay. And then again, political relationships are obviously going to affect this global agriculture. Scan the QR code to read more about banana production. So, and kind of what's concerns about that. Colonialism and neocolonialism affect global systems. So going back to that Unit 4 stuff, think about this. If I am a European country that has a hold in like Central America, and I know that they make a ton of money off those cash crops, I'm not going to let go of my control in that. So I might tell the people, hey, we'll provide you with some of the farm equipment, but we get all the profits back from the work you're doing. And so that leaves those farmers, they never advance. They just are always like, I don't know, like beholden to the colony, right? However, this also helps the trade situation. So if you are a colony or neo-colonized by a European country, you're in the direct trade route, so you can get stuff from them that you might not have been able to previously get. Fair trade products, that's a big deal these days. I don't think I have something around me here, but if you look on labels of stuff you buy, if it's like fair trade certified, that's basically a network that ensures that the people who are sourcing the material, whether it's the crop or they're making the purse or whatever it is, the person is getting a good fair share of the profit. It's not just going to the company that marketed it for them, which is good. Okay. Yeah. You'll want to go check this out. This is a great ArcGIS map. This is all again about bananas and banana terrorism. And again, the banana has become a hugely political issue. All right, infrastructure. Infrastructure, that's like your rail system, your shipping, your ports, your airports, whatever it is. Obviously, if it's a developing country with poor infrastructure, it's going to be difficult to get those crops to market. So therefore, the things that are being like exported out of a like developing country, again, those are those cash crops because they know they can send those things to America and we will pay top dollar for it. Like the amount people spend on coffee is pretty astronomical. Think about like Starbucks, how much coffee they source, excuse me, from like a mid-latitude developing country. The infrastructure is going to make sure that the coffee gets to where it needs to go, but it might not necessarily be available to get local products to the local people. Okay. So yeah, that's a whole thing. Okay. Here's a little quiz question you'll want to read through. You'll want to pause and then look through there. Okay. So what are we taking away? Agriculture products are traded around the world. Global trade can lead to economic and environmental problems in developing countries. And it's your job as a geographer to understand the economic and environmental issues associated with global agriculture and work for change. Again, it's not all bad, but there definitely are some stuff that we need to probably address. All right, 510 consequences of agricultural practices. No question, the environmental, agriculture, and societal effects of this are lingering. All right, so agriculture advancements have created some damage. Obviously, the more livestock we have more livestock than ever before. We're fattening them up for market. Those animals produce waste that is bad. It's very high in like nitrates. It messes with the land and the soil. Obviously, if that gets into water, that's not good. As we are increasing the use of chemicals to either fertilize or pesticides on products, that obviously results in pollutants, again, in your water and your soil. And as we are expanding agricultural land to grow more than ever before, we're taking up soil, we're taking up water, and then overgrazing. We're letting animals just graze over and over and over again on the same land, and it's depleting it past repair. Okay. Little science 101 here. You're going to want to look at like greenhouse emissions, and we can need to talk about that. Look at the map. You're going to want to pause here and kind of just study this little infographic a little bit more. But there certainly is a direct correlation between like where the emissions are coming from and what's being done there from an agricultural standpoint. Okay. Africa, we know that there's a high amount of deserts here, which obviously makes this non-ecumene land. Remember that from Unit 1. So we can't grow here, but the concern is that other practices are starting to desertification. There's desertification happening. So these deserts are actually growing, which is not good. We can't have that. Okay, here they are. They're growing. It's difficult to use this land when dry. So again, this is a concern. Okay, this is at risk for human-induced desertification. So think what humans have messed up the planet to a point where we're desertifying. Look at over here. Look at you're right about where my arrow is. That is probably pretty close to Fountain, Colorado. We know it's really dry here. So it's a concern. Okay, again, you'll want to read through this, the vulnerability of Africa and basically what's going on. Okay. Here's an excellent example of this. That desert is encroaching on the city. And look at the difference here. This is obviously in the green where it's been irrigated. And then look at this. This is stark difference. Okay. Fertilizers, again, they're good. They help things grow. They grow faster. They grow bigger. But it also is a problem when it's creating, pollutant. Okay. Animal waste from chicken and hog farms is a huge problem. Watch this video when you can. It's pretty eye-opening. This is water, this pink purple stuff. Obviously, that's not the kind of water you'd want to be drinking or using. This is animal waste water. This is chicken waste, and that's a concern. Okay. No, pause that. Okay. All right. CAFOs. Commercial Agricultural Feed Organizations. That's one of your vocab terms. This is a major pollutant, again, when you just have millions of animals in these fairly confined spaces. And again, how do you dispose of the animal waste? And then when the animals are dying and they're not being used for market, so like if they die of like natural causes, just like what do you do with the carcasses of all this? Okay. Soil salinization. That's too much salt in the soil. Egypt is experiencing this as well. Okay. Sorry, here we go. You guys can see aerial photograph. The salt is the white. So it's pretty wild what's going on there. They dammed up the river and basically the salt just deposited where they had the dam set up. Okay, nice little practice question here. You'll want to pause. Okay, and what is our takeaway? Increases in agricultural production have had significant impacts to the environment. Okay, again, read the infographic is good. I don't want to just be like, here, read all the infographics, but that's kind of what you need to do here because you're going to understand more about how the topography, which is like mountains versus valleys and rivers, climate, culture, resources have led to major impacts on deforestation, shifting agriculture, terracing. That's when you cut like steps into the side of a mountain. The mountain isn't supposed to be farmed, so they're cutting the steps out. You see this a lot in Asia for like the rice farming, irrigation, and then draining wetlands to use that for farming areas. Okay, again, terraced farming. I mean, this is beautiful. It's really cool looking, but obviously it can have a consequence because it's changing the landscape. Okay, irrigation. That's how the whole like California. Remember in the food machine video where they talked about where the tomatoes came from? It's completely dry. They had to irrigate. They had to bring in water from a dammed area. Okay. Irrigation system, ditches and trenches. So you guys can see here, they build these little canals and then they redirect the water where they need it to go. Okay. The Aral Sea in Kazakhstan has shrunk because the water was pulled from that area and taken into farming areas. And so obviously we're having that's like a major concern that we're literally shrinking seawater or bodies of water to take it elsewhere. Okay, draining the wetlands. In the Netherlands, they call this a polder. Basically, they they vacuum the water from like a low-lying land area and reveal the soil again, which is great. And they're trying to make maximum use of that because the land is a little bit more useful than like salt water often. But obviously, you're changing the landscape. This is possibilism at its finest. Okay, deforestation, no question. We're cutting down more forest than we know what to do with at this point. I think every 30 seconds, a land the size of a football field is cleared. And that's obviously not sustainable practices. Okay, here's what's going on. Causes of deforestation, look at this. 80% of it is to make room for cattle ranching, to fatten up cattle to go to market. Okay, there you go. Slash and burn, that's a method, or that's a term you guys have in your vocab. So there you go. Okay, you guys are going to want to pause all these and look more. Palm oil. If you go to the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, they have an interesting exhibit about this in the monkey house and just like the major issues that this is causing. Okay, practice question for you. Okay, basically, we're changing our physical landscape, terracing, irrigating, draining wetlands, deforestation. Humans are changing the face of the planet. Okay, 5:11, guys, we're almost done, I promise. Challenges of contemporary agriculture. So this is such a controversial subject today. GMOs, genetically modified organisms. People freak out, oh, I don't want a frankenfruit. But it's also because of GMOs that we've actually helped stave off starvation around the world. They've modified, I have a lot of nerve. Humans have modified crops that they can grow in places they never were able to grow before, so they can actually feed more people around the world. This is a really interesting graphic here to show, this is like the hybridization, the GMOs, and like the type of fertilizer. So you can see like these tomatoes after 45 days, this is like the natural tomato, goes bad. versus look at what's going on over here. These tomatoes are still like, this has huge positive consequences for like food availability around the world. Okay. Advances in biotechnology, GMOs, and aquaculture. That's where we're farming like fish in like water, because that's where a fish is. Concerns about water and soil usage, discussions about the reduction of biodiversity. Obviously, for hybriding things together, we're getting rid of like we're making less things, right? Because we're mashing things together. How sustainable is this? People worry that these have caused irreparable damage to the ecosystem. And there's no question we've jacked up the ecosystem. But we also probably have time to fix it. Irrigation of fields. Obviously, when we start to irrigate places that didn't naturally have water, we're drilling wells, we're depleting rivers and streams that are nearby. We can damage crops. We talked about monocropping again, when you use the same crop over and over again. Deforestation, oil, and overgrazing are causing erosion as well. So we're doing this commercial renaissance we're in is causing some problems. Okay. The Green Revolution, we talked about that again. That's like, basically, we're going to make more new crops, but again, they're all the result of like hybrid crops. GMO, hybrid, cloning things like bananas, but they're showing that like a cloned banana is actually way more susceptible to disease than like a conventional, like natural banana. Consumption patterns have consolidated the number of plants eaten, especially in the United States. I think you saw it earlier. We only eat like 7 animals, or like 4 animals and like 7 vegetables. Like it's our diets are really, really narrow. We just do a lot with that stuff. So globally we're having less and less of like a variety of food eaten, because we're consolidating them into these like GMOs and like frankenfruits. I keep saying that. Okay. Domestic farm animals again have decreased by 50%. But we are fattening up these animals the way nature did not intend. Like beef cattle, that's not natural. We are doing that to them to get as much meat off of them as we can. Okay. Agricultural chemicals, again, you're going to want to read this. Basically, chemical fertilizers creating pollution, and pesticides are having detrimental effect on the soil and the water we use. And you'll want to pause and do more on this. Okay. Governments, NGOs, that's a non-government organization. Agribusinesses and farmers need to work to create sustainable agriculture. We have to work together to figure out how we're going to feed the planet, basically, but not kill the planet at the same time. Okay, nice little question for you to practice. Okay, what's your takeaways? Modern agricultural practices have caused environmental problems. Different groups are working to create sustainable systems of agriculture, and it's your job as a geographer to understand the effects of modern ag practices at a variety of scales to work towards sustainability. All right, the last one. 512. Oh, you know what? This one's not done yet. So we're going to end here, and I'll post 512 as a separate video. You guys are awesome. Thank you.